This mosque here in Altoona is the center for worship for those of the Islamic faith here in the Chippewa Valley. They are assimilating into their communities just as they are nationwide, according to a recent Pew Research Center report. This is Muslim and American in the Chippewa Valley, a special report. I'm Wayne Sorge.
Well, I think the Pew Research basically acknowledges that a lot of Muslims have become a successful portion of the general public. That is, the attitude toward America overall is positive. For the most part, they believe that through hard work they can achieve good life. For the most part, the survey tells us that they have a positive attitude toward the country and its institutions. And for the most part, it tells us that Muslims in America somewhat have done better than Muslims in Europe in terms of the assimilation or integration.
The people here are in this mosque, there is about 38, 39 families. And like most Muslim and maybe Arab immigrants, they usually higher education and higher income because of their professional by the time.
Once they get here, though, in spite of being middle to upper class and earning a good living, there are still some problems they face as far as mistreatment in the community, in the workplace, in the business place, aren't there?
Well, fortunately, half the people in this community, our community, are physicians. And about maybe 20–30% are professors. And therefore, they have, by their professions, have reasonable place, reasonable position where they are. So far, they have mutual respect with their fellow people who work there. Few people in this community are blue-collar workers, and these majority of these are the ones whom you expect some form of mistreatment. In our case, it only happened shortly after 9/11, and I remember this about eggs on the wall, on the door of the mosque, or some paint on the windows, sort of silly stuff which we recognized as sort of some people venting their rage in some fashion at the time. But we had received a lot of support, even then, more support than ever, during the shortly for a number of months and after 9/11. That's why I'm saying majority of us really do not feel that way. And I've been in this community for 35 years myself, so I consider this is myself a part and parcel of this, for me, my children, and my grandchildren.
You are happy and here to stay, and your family is here to stay?
Well, obviously, I have 3 children, and one here, one in Minneapolis, one in Chicago. They all have their own grandchildren, and so this is my home.
You do still feel some ties, though, to your culture?
Oh yes, obviously. You see, this is everyone has his own background, and in fact, I continue to have family connections. I'm originally from Egypt. I do visit them maybe every couple of years, and I maintain a lot of cultural things from the home country.
The report has a positive notch to it, although there are glitches here and there, so to speak, in terms of the difference between younger and older Muslims toward the situation of terrorism and global events. But overall, as we can talk about this later, I think Muslim attitude is positive. But when it comes to U.S. foreign policy behavior, you could tell that there are issues that we need to tackle with.
There is some attention given to the negative reaction to our current foreign policy in Iraq and elsewhere, but it's not just Muslims who have a negative reaction to that. So perhaps Muslims feel a closer relationship to that issue, but they're not really that far afield from what the general population is going through as far as reassessing what the government is doing. Wouldn't you say that's the case?
Absolutely. I mean, Muslim by virtue of being Muslims and being mostly immigrants and perhaps Muslim converts in this country, they're closer to issues than the general public altogether. So it is close at heart when it comes to the question of Iraq and the Palestinian situation, the question of Muslim, non-Muslim relationship. And in post 9/11, of course, the world has turned upside down for a lot of Muslims. So they are more concerned, they are more targeted as in terms of profiling, and they feel a bit of squeeze after 9/11. There have been incidents across the country. So obviously issues of foreign policy are closer at heart. I was just looking at the Pew survey very quickly. It is interesting that even after so many years, after 9/11 in Iraq, still 42% of Americans seems to argue that U.S. decision to invade Iraq was the right decision, despite all the evidence that it was a hasty decision, and perhaps some have argued intelligence was cooked up to justify policy. Still 42% believe that the Iraq decision was the right decision. To me, that is just a reflection of the split within the general public when it comes to the, so to speak, conservative, Democratic, Republican divide, which again still resonate in the general politics. But for the Muslim American, of course, being more conscientious about foreign policy by the virtue of being Muslims, and U.S. policy in the Middle East is so controversial, to say the least. So they have, by a very large margin, they believe that Iraq invasion was a mistake, and U.S. needs to work on its foreign policy toward the Middle East, for example. So yes, there is that gap, but again, Muslims are simply closer. They have the issues closer at heart.
Muslims can perhaps see the broader context of the Middle East difficulties than the average American can, wouldn't you say?
Yes, they can, with a touch of kind of caution. That is, let's not forget that when we talk about Muslims, we are talking about many different ethnic groups and with different backgrounds. Mm-hmm. And there are more educated Muslims and less educated Muslims. Officially, we have about 57 Muslim countries, mm-hmm. plus India could be the second or third largest Muslim country in the world, given the size of its population of almost 160 million Muslims. So Muslims are diverse, so are Muslim Americans in terms of who they are, where they came from, and versus the native Muslims, who people were converted or were born here, etc. So there is that diversity, which I guess, we would like to caution people to have in mind.
It seems that there is not the luxury in the United States, in the Muslim world, for as much fraction as there is in the Middle East, because you seem to be drawn together by the fact that you are still somewhat of a minority, and in a community like Eau Claire, Altoona, you have one mosque, and apparently diverse backgrounds assemble there.
Well, you're right. I mean, first, by the virtue of being a minority in a large